What's going on, you gamers? Today I'm going to be going over my thoughts on the recently released Diablo 4 beta, what I liked, what I didn't, and things that I think are looking pretty promising for the future. So if that interests you, stay tuned. That's coming up next. So after sinking around 30 to 40 hours in the first beta and now quite a few in the second one, I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp of the game, so I thought I'd make a video on some of the game's kind of pros and cons. Now firstly, getting it straight out the way, whilst this game does take some elements of Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, make no mistake, it is very much its own game. It has all the classic feels of a Diablo game, but at the same time manages to feel quite fresh, and that's definitely a good thing. There's only so far that rehashing and bringing out the same style of game manages to go, and although I'd say Diablo 4 is far from innovative, it does try to take the best elements from both, as well as some other games, in order to give you quite a lot to do in this much more open world experience. So going over the good points, and firstly I would say that the characters that you choose feel very distinctive, enough to easily warrant a few playthroughs, whether it be the up close and personal approach of the barbarian or the longer, much more ranged approach of the sorcerer. Each felt unique and fun to play, although the melee classes I did feel struggled a little bit in some areas, mainly probably down to some of the boss AoE mechanics. But each having its own playstyle and its own class optimization really helped to spice things up, and some of these could make your build ridiculously overpowered late game, like that of the sorcerer and their enchantment slots, that allow you to have kind of permanent passive effects or skills at no real extra cost. Now jumping over to the leveling, and I'd say they've pretty much got this spot on. Not once did it feel like it was a grind to reach the next level, and although it will obviously take a little bit more XP the later on you get, the pacing to me felt pretty much perfect, as you leveled up and managed to get a lot stronger quite quickly once you started gearing up and unlocking your skill tree. Next up, something that I definitely liked was the much more open world aspect of this game. This makes it so that playing multiple classes or just enjoying the game in general was much more down to what you wanted to do and how you wanted to tackle things, meaning no single playthrough had to be the exact same experience. Want to go and farm loads of gear and aspects early on? Then that's not a problem. Want to farm XP through events and beat in loads of trash mobs? Then that's another viable option. As well as, of course, you could just go straight through the campaign, doing all of the main questline and complete it as fast as possible in order to try and hit that endgame. Obviously for the beta we are capped at level 25, so that's not an option, but you can very much tell that it's a game you can take at your own leisure in general, pretty much do things however you want. Now another thing that I was really impressed with was the graphics. At first I didn't think they were that great, but as I started to venture around, the more I realised that the characters and buildings and the lighting and shadow effect are actually all very good. I'm on Xbox Series X, so no doubt if this was on PC on the highest settings, these would be absolutely exceptional. And after going back and playing Diablo 3, trust me, these are definitely a big overhaul. Now jumping from how good things look over to how the game feels. In a game like this, combat can completely make or break it. If it doesn't feel good, you're probably not going to spend 1,000 hours ridding the lands of evil and decimating your foes. Fortunately, the combat is both fluid and has very good pacing. I would say it's slightly faster paced than 2, but maybe not quite as fast as 3, although depending on how the endgame is and the gear that you manage to equip, this could possibly change. One nice addition that I initially thought was quite funny was that of the short dodge mechanic. I tried this straight away at the start of the game and started making fun of it with some friends. However, after several hours of gameplay I realised that it's actually quite an integral mechanic, and that a lot of enemies have certain attacks or moves you'll often try to avoid with what you at first probably thought was a funny little hop. Add to this all the skills you acquire through your skill tree and you'll be pleasantly hacking and slashing away for many hours. Speaking of the skill tree, and honestly I love what they've done with it. The layout is probably in my opinion far from ideal, and it's not the prettiest thing to look at, but the fact that you can test skills and reset them whenever you want makes it very easy to test builds and find skills and combos that are very powerful. Also, probably the best thing about it is up in the top right hand corner you have a keyword search now that allows you to search for different options. This makes it so easy to make an ideal build, as it will literally highlight skill nodes that match what you're after. Gone are the days of looking things up on the internet or having to go and find a website build finder. Now it's easier than ever. Missing Vulnerable, check it out on the top right and see every node that applies that or has some kind of effect around it. These keywords make life so much better and can make things amazing when you have a new weapon or a new skill you want to centre things around. Now there's a lot more I could list here, but unless I want people to fall asleep watching an hour long video, then the last one I'm going to be going over is going to be the loot. From what I've seen so far, there is a lot to do with loot. Not only have you got a wide variety of loot with variable stats, but also now you have aspects, which is a kind of special affix you can attach to your gear, which very often makes even a rare variety loot very feasible for keeping hold of and equipping, because it may have the exact stats on it you're after, and then you can put an aspect in it in order to make it even more powerful. Also, I'm not sure if they've buffed the drop rate, but in the demo I was literally swimming in legendary equipment, and at one point I actually obtained 7 pieces in one dungeon, which is pretty amazing for being able to get a strong build quite easily. There'll be a lot of random stat rolls, so being able to wait for an abundance of legendary gear can definitely help make you gear up quicker. Now over to the bad points, and honestly the good ones definitely so far tend to outweigh the bad, but there are a few things that I'd like to see changed or maybe improved. So first up, it's going to be the dungeons we're looking at. I think a lot of people may be a little bit upset that they seem quite samey. They're definitely not completely randomly generated, so expect to see the same layout very often. However, for me, I've played lots of games very similar, and as long as the combat and content keeps me entertained, I can quite easily overlook this. However, one thing I found that was probably the most tedious was needing a specific drop, whether it be an item or a key, in order to get into the last area with the boss. Often you found yourself backtracking throughout the whole dungeon just to find an enemy you'd missed or a path you hadn't taken. I'm hoping this isn't consistent all the way through the game, because I found it made the dungeons have a lot of downtime with combat, so I could definitely see this getting old pretty fast. Jumping over to the stats, and whilst they've made it very easy to put a build together, working out exactly what it's going to do, especially damage wise, can be a little bit on the tougher side. In fact, there's a lot of stats you'll be used to in other games, like item level and additional damage to certain types, for example fire, but then there's also a few that seem to be very much centered around luck, such as lucky hit and nova power, which are much more chance based and can often lead you to do random bits of massive damage without you fully understanding how you managed to pull it off. Next up, we'll be tackling loot and your inventory space. As I mentioned earlier, this game, at least in the demo, throws massive amounts of loot, and especially legendaries your way, more so probably than any other game I've played. Whilst this is definitely a good thing in some ways, in other ways it takes away from the enjoyment of when you get that one lucky shiny drop, because you'll be picking up so many legendary items that they seem to lose a little bit of their value. Maybe not in-game value, but maybe in excitement value. I myself definitely like it when drops are a little bit rarer, so that you have that excitement when something of a really rare colour drops on the floor and you find yourself highlighting it, scrolling over its stats and hoping it's something amazing. Also, the inventory space is so minimal that by 25 I had so many legendaries, I was often discarding stuff during my dungeon journeys or dismantling them when I got back to town. So I'm hoping at later levels you're definitely able to hold a lot more than this, as that will make your life much easier. Now this next one is going to be about repetitive quests. A lot of the quests in this game are really good and different. This one mainly involved when I was in towns. I found that quite a few quests in town were very samey, and ultimately ended up with me going into someone's cellar and having to exorcise a child or beat a demon down in there for some reason. In fact, seeing as I'd only visited about 3 or 4 towns, the amount of times I'd gone in someone's basement in order to beat a baddie seemed a little bit too often for my liking. I'm hoping this changes as you progress further in the game and that quests like this aren't commonplace all the way through. Finally, over to the classes, and all of them feel absolutely amazing. They're very different, they're all quite distinct with their own playstyles, but some I feel probably have a little bit of balancing issues at the very start, as a couple are very much overpowered early on compared to the others. There's definitely some reworks and balancing issues that will need to be addressed in the long run, but Blizzard are already looking into this, so it's good to see that it's on their agenda. Overall, I think that Diablo 4 is a massive step in the right direction, and the more open world approach, even though it's been done in a lot of other games, is almost always a good thing. It offers more freedom to do things as you want, and with the inclusion of the world bosses and events, they could quite easily add content or special events at any time. So whilst Diablo 4 isn't reinventing the wheel, I do think they are trying to make it the best game possible by taking the best parts from previous titles, like the upgrade to skills on gear as seen in Diablo 2, or the fact you can respec and change skills whenever you want in 3, or of course things from a lot of other games like world events and world bosses. And remember, this isn't the full game, there's still a lot more to come, such as the PvP, which they said will be quite a big thing, as well as endgame activities to look forward to. I am a little bit apprehensive about how they get on with the Paragon, because I think that maxes out 100, so I want to see exactly where they're going and why people should be grinding at endgame. But seeing as people still play Diablo 2 and Diablo 3 after all of these years, there's no doubt in my mind that they've got something in place that will keep people entertained. Probably similar to every big release lately. Day one, there's bound to be issues. You're probably going to have server issues where you can't get on or glitches during the game, and there'll be quite a few patches in order to make the game run smoothly. But from everything I've played so far, it's definitely looking like a worthy Diablo title, and I can't wait to see what's in store for me further down the line. Let me know in the comments what class you're looking forward to playing upon the game's full release, but as always, for all things gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.